So I would like to open up with mihi mihi, but in my language. So Sabaidi Batukun Kopjalai Jauma Fangkoi Wau Musawni. Sư Koi Samson Phommachack, Mẹ Sư Sang Pet, Paul Sư Pu Hai. Koi Ben Kon Lao, Patet Koi Patet Lao, Kopjalai. Good morning, everyone. My name is Samson Phommachack. My mother's name is Sang Pet. My father's name is Puhei. I was born in New Zealand. My nationality is Laotian, and the motherland is Lao or Laos. Thank you very much for coming this morning, and it's awesome to see everyone's smiling faces so early. And I want to thank Tammy and Pearly for asking me to speak about this theme, Sanctuary, today. I think it's quite fitting. Again, as a storyteller, I like to preface that this is my story, and it's not something that, I would want you to go away and try to replicate or become a monk or anything like that. It's just a matter of sharing my story and hopefully giving you some ideas or some provoking some thought within you as well. But this is me. But first, before I jump into the monkhood experience, which I named Diaries of a Mid-20s Monk, the reason why I named that is because throughout my time as a monk, I did daily journaling, if not more than once a day, 3 times a day. But before we understand that and have a look at that, it's important to understand my upbringing in New Zealand and how that's affected what I was then to experience as a monk. My parents are the most brave and daring people I know. They escaped war-torn Laos during the American and Vietnam War. Laos still to this day is the most heavily bombed country in the world. They crossed the Mekong River by boat to enter into a refugee camp in Thailand, where they spent 18 months, not knowing which country they were going to go to or if they would get into any country at all at the time, as well as not knowing if they'll ever see their family again. And I'm from a big family, so my mother's from a family of 12 siblings, my father's from a family of 7. So our family gatherings are really fun, and there's never a dull moment. And then in the concept of our culture, family extends further beyond blood relatives. So when I introduce people who I either grew up with or are family friends, I usually say they are my cousin, and people laugh. But then I have to distinguish who are my blood-related cousins. But that's another story in itself. My mother and my father were sponsored by a lovely retired couple here in New Zealand. They were very fortunate to be picked by them. So we're very, very thankful. If it wasn't for them, I would not be here today or have not had the opportunities I've had growing up in this beautiful country. My parents worked 2 jobs, 7 days a week, so very hardworking. When they weren't looking after me, I was looked after by a lot of aunts, uncles, and my grandparents, as you can see at the top here, did live with us for a period of time, and I was privileged to learn the language from them, so Laotian is the official language. I can't read and write, which is a shame, but I still have time to do that. My grandparents are role models to me. My puto, which is grandpa, he is a respected community elder, an entrepreneur, and an ideas man. He always told me the best stories, and as a kid growing up with English not being my first language, storytelling was a way where I could make sense of the world, and I could always continue on with that even throughout my life. And I learned through him to ask the question of why. So I always ask why everywhere I go, and sometimes it does get annoying for employees, but look, it's the way that I'm wired, and it's the way that I make sense of what I can do and contribute to. My grandma, or Metu, she's an amazing mother to 12 children, always calm, always composed, and she's the matriarch of our family. Although my grandfather does a lot of the talking, she is definitely the one who commands the room and organizes everyone in the way that she does. And then even in primary school, after school, I was also looked after by a Māori family. So you can see my upbringing is quite enriched with different cultures throughout schooling, which I'll talk about next. I lived in a very Eastern household in a very Western society. So you can imagine the conflicting things that I had growing up, and the values in home were not necessarily aligned to the values outside of home. Throughout schooling, I attended low decile schools in Wainuiomata, and I'm very proud of that in hindsight, is that it taught me a lot of street smarts. I had a lot of brothers and sisters who weren't Asian, first of all. Asians were a minority group back then. I was the only Asian I knew in my school, and if I knew others, they were my cousins, actual cousins. And, you know, at a very young age of 5, I knew I was going to university. And people go, well, how did you know you were going to university? The reason why I knew was that getting an education for my parents was the most important thing that they could provide their children, particularly if they've just escaped their war-torn country. And they knew that, in their eyes, having a better life is obtained by achieving an education, and it's not something that they had the opportunity to experience. So there was a lot of weight on my shoulders, I'm not going to lie, and it killed me not to go out partying or skipping school, but I knew that deep down I really wanted to make my family proud. No one had ever gone through schooling successfully and even gone to university, so I speak of this like quite easily, but it was also challenging for me as well. I had to do a lot of hours in high school just to really get my writing up and getting into university and gaining university entrance as well. Fast forward to the year I was to become a monk. I was 25 that year. These photos here sort of bring back a lot of memories. I don't know if they're good or bad. I think they're all of the above. The title there is Nothing But Business. I was in a startup at the time in our second year, so first time co-founder. And those who know the entrepreneurial world, it's a roller coaster. Sometimes it's fun and sometimes it's not. But this year was one of the best years I've had, but also the worst in terms of my health. So the stark reality of this is that I was focused all on the startup and the business and the community within the startups space at Creative HQ at the time, but what I didn't take care of is my health, my mental, my physical, my spiritual health. I was exhausted. I had burnt the candle out on both ends, and I remember the day before jumping on a plane to go to Laos, I managed to get to the library and get a book out called like Buddhism 101 or like Monkhood 101, just because I had no time to really grasp the fact that I was about to take that journey. And so we had hosted our end of year party where we invited friends, investors, and customers. So you can imagine my mind was very busy, and I was exhausted that day. So this monk experience couldn't have come at a better time. So before I play this video, ordained to be into monkhood. So I spent 7 days in the monastery. So that's why I call it temporary monkhood. I don't want to claim that I was a monk for, you know, years and years and years, although I could have. I guess it's the individual's choice whether they feel that they have a calling to stay in the monastery. Again, if you look at the year that I was in, I was a business owner, so I couldn't just leave all of a sudden and never come back. But the 7 days I spent in the monastery as a monk changed my life completely. Here's me moments before the whole ceremony into the monkhood began, day 1, and you can see in this video how nervous and excited I am. On the countdown to becoming a monk, in about an hour or so, I'll probably have my head shaved and my eyebrows are gone. Just a bit part just before, and then I'm going to watch shortly. So me and David are going to become monks. So I'd like to say that I could have become a YouTuber at the time, but YouTube wasn't that hot in terms of influencer. But this was shot on a GoPro, so if you see this sort of warped fisheye lens, it's because of the GoPro. But yeah, that was me at 25. I'm now in my early 30s, FYI. So at this point, we had completed initial proceedings. There's a lot that goes on in this, and I only have 20 minutes, so I've just picked the start, which was the induction, the mid point, which was a few days into the monastery, and then at the end, reintegrating back into quote unquote the real world for me. So we shaved our heads and eyebrows. we swapped our civilian clothes into Nark clothing. So what you see here on the far right-hand side, the Nark is, in Lao mythology, it's a cross between a snake and a dragon that dwells in the water. It acts as a connection between human and the spiritual realms. For New Zealand, it's the equivalent of a taniwha. So this is what we got out of our normal clothes, got into this attire, and then you'll see in the next few slides me in my monk robes. So 7 days in the monastery, but what people don't know is that there's a week prior in terms of preparation, and then there's the week during, and then there's a week after. So it's 3 weeks in total. All very overwhelming, but the best experience I've ever had. And on the far right there is me with my head shaven. I get asked a lot, like, why do monks shave their heads and their eyebrows? It's one key indicator that of the renunciation, showing that the person has given up ordinary life and will live outside of social conventions. So going into the monastery is a selfless act. It's one where you remove all titles, brother, sister, oh, I'm not a sister, but brother, son, partner, all of that disappears, because what you're essentially doing is you are the connection between Buddha and the people. So you are no longer Samson, or who you've come into the monastery with. You are an ordained monk. So here I got to experience this monkhood experience with my cousin David, and these are my uncles, aunties, and my mother as well in the red. And this was just shortly after we had finished the last proceeding of the monk ceremony, which I'll show you. So at this moment, my excitement turned to feeling of overwhelm, and it really sunk in that I was going to become a monk. So when you become a monk, it brings the whole village together. It's almost like this big party, because it's such a milestone and such a big event for a lot of families and the person that's becoming a monk. So you'll see here. So in this video, we had to walk around the monastery 3 times before entering into the sacred hall for the final proceedings to take place on that day. So the music and the voice antics, there's a reason for it. So it's to awaken the ancestors and to invite those who have passed on to also enjoy and join in on the festivities and this moment of becoming a monk. So the becoming of a monk, I want to read this to you guys. 3 months took us through the induction ceremony. 3 months to 1 month. We were dressed by the elder monks. We had to recite after them, and when only invited were we allowed to move. The monk moving us forward did so using our monk pray sash material. It was the head Nyapa, which is the superior monk, who we then eventually get to at the end. Getting up and down in the monk robes proved very difficult. At first, we had to bow and get up and down 3 times, putting our hands on the floor like this and then up again. So you can imagine my head at this time was just like, what is happening, and the energy in that room was like no other energy I've ever felt before. So no one can go into that sacred hall unless you're being ordained to become a monk or you are a monk. So I'm a big believer in energy, and in that room there are monks from the village that I became a monk in. There were monks who come from far and wide from different villages to participate in inducting us or ordaining us into monkhood. This here is the last proceeding before the officially becoming a monk, and now so we've stripped out of our narc attire, so that was the water dragon and snake, and then slowly but surely we were dressed by the monks, and then now we're in our final robes and being given our final blessings to join the rest of the monks. So that's going from being an ordinary person through to becoming a monk. So day 4 into my experience as a monk, what I knew to be true was, what I discovered was a lot of it wasn't true, funny enough. So in spending time with monks, having conversations, this person here was my teacher during my entire time there. And the conversations that I had and the meditation that I was participating in and the service that I was to the community really taught me a lot. It questioned a lot of what I thought I knew. Bear in mind I was 25, you still don't really know a lot at 25. But I was challenged daily when I was at the monastery. The biggest reality for me was the construct of time and the emphasis and importance we place on time, like, you know, how many meetings can you fit within, you know, an 8-hour day, or, you know, how long is it going to take me to get from A to B, and you're worrying more about getting to A to B than you are actually about the journey of getting to A and B and smiling at people and sparking conversations with strangers. Because I thought I knew a lot at 25, but I really didn't. And when the monks were teaching, they never told you whether something was right or wrong. They would always tell you through story. Again, this theme keeps reoccurring in my life, where I learned my greatest lessons through storytelling, and that's something that I really love about Buddhism. In my experiences, I'd be told a story, and then they would allow me to think about what I thought the meaning was, or my interpretation of the story that they told. There was one particular evening that in our prayer session, that what I thought was 30 minutes ended up actually being 3 hours. So what ended up happening was, when we were chanting in our prayer, I had the elder monks in front of me and the novice monks who were between the ages of 8 and 16 behind me. And if you have children or have been around children, there's an innocence about them that is very pure and very powerful. So with having this senior monks in front of me and the junior monks behind me, me in the middle, by day 4 I had also memorized and was participating a lot more in the chants. So it's Sanskrit. It's a lot harder when you can't read it, but I was learning through sound. So I would spell out the way that they would say it, and then therefore I would have my own notes and then just read off of that. But I would say I had an out-of-body experience, and whether people believe that or not, I definitely do, where I knew I was sitting there and I had been meditating for half an hour, that it ended up being this experience of being taken out and just floating and really observing from an outside-in view of my surroundings. And it was as if the physical and spiritual world had become one at that time, which was insane because I'd only been in there for 4 days. But for me, I jumped into the experience wholeheartedly. I made sure I participated in everything and just really appreciated this moment that I had and was having. So that's me sitting under a 100-year-old plus Bodhi tree on New Year's Eve. So that was a really, really powerful way to spend my New Year's Eve and entering into the new year, which I was super excited about entering into. And these are the days in between. So in this photo here, these are photos of the novice monks that I got to spend a lot of time with. I taught them English at night because there wasn't much else to do in the monastery, and they really enjoyed that experience with me. And then on the far right there, the elder monks, the monk in the middle closest to the stupa, Buddha stupa, is the superior monk, the head monk of the monastery. And I had a little interaction with him, but he was a very busy man, head of a monastery. So when I don't show this photo, people often think that I was staying in a fancy wellness retreat where, I got like room service and all this sort of stuff, or a monastery that you see in the movies where you have Shaolin monks like fighting and the temples up in the mountains. That was not me, but I wouldn't have it any other way. It was a local monastery in my grandfather's village. And if you've been to Southeast Asia in general or Laos, you know that there's this was 1 out of 1,000 temples within a very close proximity. So in New Zealand, I would liken it to like churches. There's a lot of churches in different suburbs. We had no fancy luxuries, or we only had the basic facilities. And I actually slept on do you call it a veranda here? Yeah, like a veranda out in the open with a mosquito net. So I was in the elements, and in my first few days, I got really annoyed by a rooster and the different animals that are there. Because in a monastery, people in the village take injured animals or animals that they believe have been reincarnated as a family member to the temple, so that their karmic line can then improve as they go through their next lives. And so there were a lot of animals. 4:45, I would wake up and with other newly ordained monks, we would go and sweep the floor of the temple to make sure that it's clean and ready for the day's service. 6 a.m. we walk around the village for simplicity's sake, our monk bowls, where the village people make their offering, and then we bless their offering. So that's their blessing for the day. At 7, we have breakfast. It's what people in the village cook and offer the monks. And again, it was all these little lessons, like when you're eating, you're not, as a monk, you don't, when you're eating a chicken wing, for example, you just rip it like from your teeth and off the bone, whereas monks believe to cherish what you're eating and really think about where the foods come from. So we have to, if we're going to rip it, we rip it with our hands. We always pick up one item of food at a time as opposed to multiple. We don't use spoon or fork. And it's really about envisioning or imagining that, let's say I was eating a broccoli, closing my eyes, where did the broccoli come from? Who was the broccoli grown by? Thanking and feeling grateful and appreciating the farmers who grew this broccoli, and then that the broccoli is now going to go into my body and nourish my body for the remainder of the day. Because after lunch at 12 and after the afternoon prayer, we don't eat, we fast till the following day. So it's from 12 to the following day. We only drink water and, interestingly enough, hot soy milk is another popular liquid choice. So this is a beautiful monastery that I was in. Our morning prayer, and this is the prayer hall on the right, and then this is the sacred hall where I showed that video just before of me being ordained as a monk. And the little bowls is what I was describing about being quite intentional about what was in each bowl, and that was the start of then practicing a lot more mindfulness when you're eating. This is fun. So as I mentioned, I kept a diary. I didn't have anything else. I didn't have a phone or any technology. It was just me, a pen and a piece of paper, because one of the elder monks knew I wanted to document my experience, so he allowed me to write. So this is Wat Ban Nasai Nua, so that's the temple name. And this is just a fun little sketch that I drew in the gong hall down there. So I spent a lot of time in the gong hall, which I've got a photo of. It's 3 gongs. It's made out of cow skin, and they're wooden gongs as well. These are pictures of the monastery that I took in that GoPro lens, which I sort of regret now because it's a bit warped. But it was a massive monastery, beautiful inscriptions and paintings all around. And yeah, that was my day-to-day for the 7 days. A day after exiting the monastery and participating in the exit ceremony, my cousin and I came back to document everything with our camera so that we would never forget this experience. And I'm glad I did, because I'm able to now share this with you all today and have memories of this for the rest of my life. So that's the gong hall that I spent a lot of time journaling and meditating and just reflecting and pondering. There were no clocks, and the gong was the signal as to when things were happening in the day. So when the gong was rung the second time in the day, I knew it was afternoon, I knew it was 12 o'clock. So that was a really cool way to experience time and the flow of time. And then this is myself and my cousin after the exit ceremony, and then going back to see the novice monks and elder monks. Coming back to Aotearoa, I found the adjustment back into society quite challenging. I continue to write daily entries into the diary of my experiences, integrating back into society, and with this outlook that I now had, that I applied to business, but also my many roles as a son, a brother, a partner, and a friend. So I'll read this diary entry here. People ask me how it was being a monk, or how was the monk thing? I always respond with my eyebrows and bald head, but it was much more than that. You discover yourself, your current self. You have enlightened conversations with elder monks. You learn to let go of things more in life. Not everything can be planned. You love the family you have as they care for you and love you, and you only have one family. So I want to end with some parting words from a wisdom of a mid-20s monk in his diary entry. Never demand for things. People who demand are not those who will have great fortune. What you eat is a blessing. Eat slower, don't rush, and appreciate the food that you're able to afford. You can live with very little, but do more with what you already have. Taking time to relax gives you 100 times back in future, as hard as it is to do that in this day and age. Sharing moments and experiences with others and really appreciating each other's company. So, telling people you love them, hugging them, embracing them, and all their goodness. Not many things can be done alone. You need people to help. Helping others comes in all forms. And then not everyone is ready for help, and that is okay. And then appreciate the environment that surrounds you. Thank you.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Samson, for that. Does anyone have any questions? while you're thinking of questions, I have a burning question that I'd just like to ask right now, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So, in the last, say, like 5-10 years, coming back from the monastery, how have you seen like mindfulness develop here in Aotearoa, and like how does it make you feel? What are your thoughts and feelings on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Tammy. I'll answer in two ways. The first answer is when I came back from my monk experience, integrating back into society, mindfulness or meditation was not big at all. It was considered quite woo-woo and out there, and only for the, ashrams and yogis. But I'm really proud of the movement that's been happening, and that perception has been broken down a lot, and everyday people and people who aren't spiritual are into meditation, and it's helping them and benefiting them in their day-to-day life. A lot of people did ask me, how do you meditate? But the thing that you got to remember about meditation is that you have to have a reason as to why you're meditating, and you have to be willing to explore deep things that you might not necessarily know are within you that come out, and be okay with that, because meditation does unlock things in your mind that you might not be prepared for, and it's quite confronting. So a lot of people stop it because they are confronted by that, or they don't give it enough time. They say, I sat for 10 minutes but nothing came. I didn't have this aha moment as to like, how do I raise capital for my business? It's like, that's not the point. It's about consistency, and it's about giving you a space and giving you time to process what happens to you day to day, every minute, every hour. And I see mindfulness and well-being being incorporated a lot into workplaces now, which I'm a huge advocate for, because when I started working, there was no such thing. It was you're there, you're sitting at your desk, you're working hard, and the burnout was something that you actually wanted to achieve. You wanted to tell people that you had worked 100 hours in the week and that you're feeling tired. But I like how that we're now encouraging people, and you can see it. My sister's 10 years younger than me. You can see when she enters the workforce, it's like flexible work. I mean, there's a lot that goes to flexible working and why that is happening now, but employers really care about your mental health and your mental well-being. So I'm really happy.
Yeah. It's a good evolution of our society.
Any other questions or comments?
I guess this is kind of an extension on your question. Do you have a mindfulness practice now, and what does that look like?
Yeah, wow, that's a big one. So when I came back from my experience, my practice was at like monk status. Let's just call it like statuses, monk status. So every day I dedicate an hour or two, but then being in New Zealand and being in a Western society, over time that practice changed, because I had to adapt to my surroundings and what I could actually allocate to that practice. And I used to beat myself up a lot about it, going, I don't do 2 hours anymore, and just get really caught up on that. But what I've come to appreciate is that you can have a mindfulness practice that is as simple as being aware of your footsteps as you're walking, being the headphones off and walking from train station to work, and just appreciating your surroundings. That's a practice within mindfulness. And then now as a father, so I have a young son, that changes again. So it's around deep breathing in the car on the way to work, or it's around 10 minutes just before bed and allowing my mind to just run crazy. And then, participating in events at temples here in New Zealand as well is one way to keep in touch with that. But it changes your mindfulness practice, and that's natural that happens. Yeah. Cool.
Where is the temple in Wellington?
So there are a few. The ones that I attended, there's a very beautiful one in Stokes Valley. So they're a Buddhist temple. And then we have what we call like a Lao temple as well, where the Lao community go to that temple because they've got monks that have come from Laos. Yeah, whereas the Stokes Valley Temple has a mix of monks from different backgrounds and ethnicities, and they're very welcoming as well in Stokes Valley.
Okay, cool. So if anyone's interested, Stokes Valley's where it's at. I was actually there recently, and it's Silver Street. It's gorgeous. Yeah, out there from what I've seen. But yeah, thank you so much, Samson. This was an amazing experience.